today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about understanding the causes of infidelity. Maybe you grew up in a culture where it's expected that there be infidelity. Let's start with the individual factors. There is unequal desire for intimacy. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship, and welcome to Infidelity Unmasked, Understanding the Causes. Last episode in Infidelity Unmasked, we talked about what are the signs. Now we're going to talk about the causes. And we mentioned in the last episode that there are 10 signs. If you didn't catch it, you should definitely catch it, because these signs are based on the studies done by mental health professionals and my personal experience working with people, multiple people who have infidelity occur in their marriage. And remember from last episode that the statistics on infidelity are that 20 to 40% of marriages have or will experience it. And so there's a good chance that you either know someone or maybe in a relationship yourself that involves infidelity. To really understand whether infidelity is ripe in your relationship, you need to understand some of the factors and causes. There are a bunch of individual factors, there are relational factors, there are situational factors, there are external factors, there are psychological and biological factors, and we're going to talk about all of them in this episode. Let's start with the individual factors. The obvious source of infidelity is personal dissatisfaction. There is unequal desire for intimacy. In every relationship, there's unequal desire for money. In every relationship, there's unequal desire for everything. Why? Because we are all different people and we have different levels of need in each area of personal relationship. And so because there is unequal desire, and because we're not always willing to accommodate the other person's desire, if we have less desire than they do in a particular area, let's call it physical intimacy, it is simple, easy, and even normal for that person who has more desire to become dissatisfied or unhappy in the relationship. And this can lead to infidelity, right? We're saying it's normal in relationships for each individual to have unmet needs. And what we know about unmet needs is when they remain unmet for a long period of time, there's dissatisfaction, and we might start looking outside the relationship to get that need met. In the last episode, we talked about how having a relationship with AI might become infidelity if it's fulfilling a need that should be reserved for the marriage. Even pornography might be a form of infidelity depending on how we approach it. The next individual factor are going to be emotional or psychological issues. It might be that someone has low self-esteem, or maybe they're experiencing depression, or maybe they are an alcoholic or an addict. One of the first couples I ever worked with on infidelity, one partner, we're going to call them Susie and Steve. Susie was very depressed, and Steve left Susie's depression to her therapist. He figured, well, it's an emotional problem. Susie's got to work it out with the therapist, and I'll hang around. And when Susie's got this depression thing licked, then I'll be here. Right? Leaving it to the professionals doesn't seem too unreasonable. But what happened was Susie met someone that really excited her, that snapped her out of the depression, that gave her the attention that she really craved, needed, and desired that Steve wasn't giving her. And that led to first emotional infidelity and then eventually a full-on fling. And when they came to me to work on this, one of the things that Susie identified is that Steve just wasn't giving her attention even. Not just that she was depressed, but he wasn't even giving her attention. And there was a thrill and an excitement with having an affair with one of Steve's business partners. There was a thrill and excitement of doing it under his nose that even that sounds really unhealthy, it offset the depression. Suddenly there was this shiny experience in this. She was having this ongoing depression. This depression is like a limited experience of life, and all of a sudden something new, different, and big happened that was exciting. And yeah, it was unhealthy excitement, but it was better than the depression for her. Past experiences. Maybe you grew up in a family where infidelity is the norm. Maybe you grew up in a culture where it's expected that there be infidelity. Maybe you witnessed infidelity in your own family. Maybe a role model of yours was committing infidelity. And so you, on some level, unconsciously feel like you need to do that as well. By the way, a lot of infidelity is an unconscious decision first, not really. It's not like we sit there and wake up one day and say, "Oh, I think I'll go cheat on my partner." It's more like we unconsciously cross a line and then another line and another line until we're way over the line. That's part of what we talked about in the last episode. There might be a lack of commitment. Maybe you said you were committed, but you just weren't that committed in the first place. And so it's easier to justify infidelity because you're just not experiencing, maybe you're not experiencing a lot of equipment. Equipment. You might not be experiencing a lot of equipment, but we were talking about commitment. And sometimes when there's a lack of commitment, there's a lack of equipment. All right, let's go on. Segment 2 is relational factors. It might be that in your relationship, there is a lack of emotional connection. If one partner is feeling emotionally neglected or disconnected, it can lead to them seeking intimacy elsewhere. And this is, by the way, lack of emotional connection is unusually common in relationships. If they fall in love, the intensity of falling in love wears down. They have children, they get very involved with juggling the balls of life. They stop feeding the relationship and they start feeling disconnected. They might not even know that they feel neglected or disconnected, but there's an unspoken need for connection. And they're just hoping when the kids get older, it'll happen and they meet someone and it happens there. Maybe there are unresolved conflicts. Maybe there's an ongoing unresolved conflict, and there isn't. The only communication about it is either to avoid the conflict or to explode about the conflict. That might drive you into the arms of someone else. Here's a very common one: is sexual dissatisfaction. We started out the episode talking about how people have different needs. People not only have different needs, but they have different levels of sexuality and fulfillment in sexuality. Some people are very happy having sex at 3.0, but some people really want an 8.0 experience of sex. And when there's that kind of difference and they don't talk about it and they don't make an effort to find some common ground, people start looking elsewhere. Another relational factor might be neglect and boredom. Not that different than lack of emotional connection when you think about it, but it might just be that the relationship itself has been neglected consistently, or maybe you're just freaking bored, right? You personally lost your sense of purpose and mission. You're tired of going through the motions at work. You're tired of going through the motions in your marriage, and you just start looking for greener pastures. Let's talk about situational factors. There are 3 of them off the top of my head. One is opportunity, right? What do they talk about in crime shows? Means, motive, and opportunity. So we've been talking about motive. Now let's talk about opportunity. Maybe you're traveling a lot, and maybe you're traveling a lot with the same person and they're making overtures. Maybe you're traveling a lot and you're just meeting people and people think you're attractive. And for the first time, you're feeling attractive in quite a while. And that hook gets you. That work environment or that social setting opens up a door for an experience you're not having in your relationship that you can have somewhere else. So now you've got an opportunity. Maybe while you're there, you're drinking. And maybe your drinking is leading you to behave. We all know that alcohol lowers inhibitions. Maybe it's lowering your inhibitions and your judgment is impaired. Or maybe you're trying a new drug, or maybe you're trying an old drug. Maybe you're traveling so that you can get high. And while you're there, what the heck? As long as your judgment is impaired, you follow through. Maybe it's the people that you're spending time with. There's a saying that We will be most influenced by the 5 people that we spend the most time with. If 3 out of 5 people are normalizing infidelity or accept it as something that should be, the chances are you're going to as well. So take a look at who you're hanging out with, or take a look at who your partner's hanging out with, more importantly. Segment 4, external factors. So there's stress and life changes. The impact of significant life changes or stressors such as job loss, illness, or the birth of a child on relationships might be causing stress. Sometimes when there are children, the children want to get into bed with you and you're just not having enough intimacy because you can't. There's this child in your bed. You go on a trip, you meet someone else, there's no child in your bed. You find somebody else there. Maybe you're experiencing a lack of social support from family and friends. You're feeling isolated and you're feeling vulnerable. You're not experiencing support at home. You're not experiencing support from family and friends. Maybe you're disconnected from your family and friends. Maybe you don't have a network of support and you meet someone and suddenly you feel supported. And that causes you to explore being intimate with them in a way that you should reserve for your marriage. Now let's talk about segment 5, psychological and biological factors. It might be that your attachment style and your partner's attachment style are in disharmony. Attachment style is how we connect with people. Some of us attach in ways, we have normal attachment. That's a very small percentage of people, or secure attachment. Some of us have avoidant attachment, and some of us have insecure attachment. So let's say someone who's has avoidant attachment style is married to someone with an insecure attachment style. They're going to trigger each other and actually push each other away in many ways. And maybe then you meet someone who suddenly you feel very comfortable with. Maybe it's a biological factor. Maybe you're attracted to the same sex and you haven't worked that out, and you're married to someone of the opposite sex and you're not talking about it. I've had clients who are in that situation. Maybe you're interested in having multiple partners, but your partner isn't. Maybe you are going through a change of life yourself. You are finding that you are just no longer interested in sex and your partner is. That could lead to infidelity. All right. So we've talked about the biological factors, the attachment styles, the lack of social support, the stress and life changes, the influence of peers. We've talked about alcohol or substance use. We've talked about opportunity, neglect and boredom, sexual dissatisfaction, unresolved conflict, lack of emotional connection, lack of commitment, past experiences, emotional or psychological issues, personal dissatisfaction. But let me give you the biggie. The biggie is you're not freaking talking about these things. All right. You know what? In this list, every couple I know has some of these things going on. Every couple I know could be ripe for infidelity. But the difference between some couples and couples where there's infidelity is the kind of communication and honesty that's going on. In the next 2 episodes, we're going to be talking about a lot more about communication. We're going to talk about what drives the committer of infidelity to commit it, and we're going to talk about what drives the recipient of infidelity to create the space for that to happen. Look forward to hearing from you. What's your experience? What are your interests? And also, we have an upcoming infidelity workshop. It's free in June of 24. So look forward to that. Look at richinrelationship.com for more information, or our social media posts, or you may be getting emails about it. Look forward to hearing from you, and share this podcast with other people and subscribe. Thank you.